Welcome back to the Pro Sports Podcasters on YouTube. My name's Cobe, and today I'm talking about Sorare NBA and specifically the roster I've put together for the limited competition. I spent 6 hours on the auction place today. 6 hours to get the players I was targeting. I had a list of about 15 different players I was after. I had a particular strategy in mind, particular values in mind as to how I'm going to attack Sorare NBA when it comes to the actual pay-to-play space. And it took me 6 hours, but I got the team I wanted. I'm set up for at least the first half of the season, provided not too many of my players get injured. And I'm going to go over why I selected these players and why I think this strategy could be the one for you to employ. And really, it doesn't cost you that much money. So let's get right into it. Sorare NBA, everybody. In order to understand my strategy with Sorare NBA, it's important to understand what Sorare NBA actually is. And to put it simply, it's fantasy basketball. That's what it is. You've got 2 game weeks. You've got one that runs from Monday through Thursday, and you've got another that runs Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And in those game weeks, there's a number of tournaments that are available, and whether or not you can enter those tournaments depends on the cards that you've accrued on the platform. The ones you've purchased, the ones you've won. There are requirements for each particular tournament based on the rarity of the cards. But basically what you're looking at here is fantasy basketball. And how I constructed my roster was in such a way that I wouldn't require buying too many more cards during the course of the season. I can just sort of swap in and out with the players I selected based on their expected point values. Now, I'm going to begin with a brief explanation of each card type. And basically you begin when you onboard, they give you a bunch, like 20 of these common cards. Now, these are not NFTs. These are literally just digital playing cards for you to get on the platform and play for free. That doesn't mean you can't actually win valuable prizes, because you can, although the odds are slim. Now, what I've done is I've gone ahead and taken the next step, and I'm going to be competing in the limited level tournaments. So for NFT fans, they're basically commons. As you can see on the graph here, they're limited to 5,000 of each particular player per season. And unlike, say, the Dapper Labs platform, you're not cracking packs. You're actually going on this auction platform, which I'll show you in a second, and buying these particular cards one by one. So the initial purchase is 100% through the Sorare NBA platform. Now, you can use their secondary market and actually buy from other collectors with some of the cards that they've either purchased or won. But most people begin by buying off the actual new card auction, like myself. I've actually made one particular purchase, well, 2 actually, directly from actual players on the platform. But everything else I've bought through the new card auctions. And they're released consecutively because there's only X number of them that are being released at a time. So quite literally, almost all of the digital cards, NFTs that I've purchased are numbered in the 100s because it's so new, right? This is only week 3 of this actual platform. And really that's week 2 because there's 2 game weeks in a week. So everything's new and the values are a little bit all over the place, but if you pay close attention like I did, because like I said, 6+ hours on the platform, you can find yourself some decent deals. And I gave myself a very strict budget. I did not want to break $200, so I kept everything below that. Now, why did I pick the cards I did? First of all, let's look at the scoring system. So points are worth exactly what they're worth. So a free throw is worth 1, a 2-pointer is worth 2, a 3-pointer is worth 3. Rebounds, you get 1.2 points per rebound. Assists, 1.5 points per assist, so that's pretty valuable. Blocks, 3 points per block and 3 points per steal, so defensive stats are big on this particular platform. You lose 2 points for a turnover. As long as you've made 1 3-pointer, you get a point. And as long as if you hit a double-double, you get a point. If you hit a triple-double, you get a point. So that's how the points are tallied up on the Sorare NBA system. So you need to look at 2 things, really, in my opinion, is that you want to get some prolific scorers and you want to get some defensive studs. And it's okay to have either of those come off the bench because you don't necessarily need to put up massive points. You just need to be consistent in order to put yourself in the running. And that's based on the cap system, which we'll get into. So the player cards I was purchasing was actually for the limited contender tournament. And as you can see here, the requirements are the only cards allowed are limited cards. You have to play 5, and you've got a maximum points budget of 110 points. Now, each player's points are calculated by the average of their last 10 games. So we're so early into the season, a lot of these players' point values are referencing games from last season. And if they're rookies, then they literally have a 0 because they don't have 10 games yet. They don't really have an average score yet. They haven't played. So they begin at 0. So when you're looking at who you want to purchase, you've got to keep that in mind. You've got to be aware of that 110 point cap because you can't just go and buy a bunch of studs because 110 points is only going to allow you to play maybe 1 if you're lucky. You want to squeeze in 2, you're going to play a bunch of 0s after that. Otherwise, you're basically looking at middle tier role player type players, which is what I spent a good portion of my time yesterday going after. So you're probably wondering what's up for grabs, and here you go. In the limited contender tournament, somebody who finishes in the top 10 is going to win a tier 1 limited card. Now, the higher up you finish, the better chances of that tier 1 being a real quality stud. So, I mean, literally the person who comes in first could find themselves winning a Luka Doncic or a LeBron James or something like that. And my entire roster is pretty much around the price of those players. Okay. That's kind of how it is. Like if you place high enough with what you've built, you're going to win some pretty valuable NFTs. And then you can either use them in your upcoming games or sell them for the profit. So that's why you're doing this, right? You're doing this for these impressive rewards. And as you can see here, the tournament I'm talking about, the limited contender, it actually gives rewards all the way up to 1,115th. Now, currently there's just under 3,000 people registered for the tournament, but there's still, a day or two left. So it'll be higher than that. But I mean, really, even if it gets up to 5,000, you're looking at more than 20% of the entrants will win a prize here. Now, that's going to change, right? As more people onboard onto this platform, it's going to become harder and harder to win. But if you're on early and you keep playing, your players, your individual NFTs actually improve. They earn experience. So for anybody who's played, a number of the different sports video games, you'll know that as you build a team and you play it more often, your players get better. It's the same here. Okay, it's the same here. And they even have training options each week for players that aren't in your active rosters to earn a little bit of experience while they're doing nothing. So you want to get in as early as you possibly can because that bit of experience adds to your total points at the end of each week. And if you have more experienced players than your opponent, the exact same roster as yours would lose because your players have been active for a longer period of time. Every player begins with a 5% experience bonus, and that's because it's their beginning season and every single player is new, so they start you off with a 5-point bonus, and that's really to future-proof the system because next season, all of those players that you've purchased this season or have earned this season are going to lose the initial 5% bump they had, and they're only going to retain whatever they've earned over the course of this season. When the new NFT cards come out for next season, they will begin with the 5% bump. And that's to create some parity so that if people come in later, if they come in next year, they're not losing to everybody who onboarded this year because you're going to have a little more balance with the new NFTs versus this season's NFTs. So that's why they do that. I think it's a smart move. Otherwise, you're going to have people saying, well, I got in too late. I'm never going to play. This way, doesn't matter when you get in, doesn't matter what season you begin, you can be competitive right from the start. But I'm saying get in as early as you can each season because that gives you the biggest competitive advantage. Now, did I go after any true studs? I did not. I'm going to tell you why. There's 2 reasons. First of which, there's a barrier to entry, right? The cost is high. For example, what I've got up here is four of the most recognizable players in the NBA, their lowest manager sales value, which is what I use to determine what I should be paying in new auctions. I don't want to go over what a manager is selling them for because then I might as well just buy it from another person on the platform. And it also shows what their current point values are. And this is why I did not go for them. One, they're over my budget, right? If I was to purchase one of these guys, it would completely blow my budget and I'd be forced to buy a bunch of nobodies otherwise. But two, and more importantly, is that with that 110 point cap, if you look at some of these players, you got Giannis. He's at 59 points. Jokic, 58 points. Curry, 51 points. James, 53 points. We're talking half of your actual cap budget for that tournament, which means the other four players are all going to be weak. I mean, you could literally go with, say, one other big guy and then three absolute nobodies. But if you do that and anything happens to one of those big players, they get injured, they just have a bad night, you're done. Game over. You're not winning that week. You're not even in the running that week. But if you have 4 or 5 good players who consistently perform, maybe not to the highest level, but they're asked to play a significant role in their team, you're more likely to come out with a better floor overall, right? If you're going with studs, absolute studs, and a bunch of nobodies, then you're banking on those studs having huge games. Huge. Exceeding their potential. But if you're going with 4 or 5 role player type players, then all you want is 2 of them maybe to have big games and the other ones to do what they normally do, and then you've got a chance to win. So this is what factored into my strategy. So instead, I put my ceiling at around 30 points. The absolute best players I was going to target average 30 points on this point system. So I was looking at guys like this: Bogdanovich, Thompson, Allen, and Paul. And then what I did was I didn't really 100% attach myself to any one of those players. I kind of wanted Klay Thompson the most, to be honest with you, but I watched on the new card auctions and I was just looking to figure out which one I could get cheapest. And the best deal that fell to me after about 3 hours of watching these guys go by at different times of the day, Jared Allen was the one I went with. I got him for $10 below what the lowest price on the player market sales side of the platform was. So I got him for a $10 discount in comparison to the lowest value he was being offered at from an actual collector. That's a score, in my opinion. That's an absolute score. I tried for Thompson a couple of times, but he always ended up going near the same price of what's available through a collector or higher. So I never pulled the trigger, and it was worth waiting because I saved about $5 realistically of my budget by going with Jared Allen. I'm not disappointed about it. Who knows? Maybe I get a deal on Klay Thompson later. I add him to my roster because you can do it whenever you want. But I'm going to begin the season with Jared Allen as my main guy. The next thing I looked at was role players. And the way I see it is with a 110 point cap, you can average 22 points per player. So the most balanced roster would be 5 players of 22 point value. It's not going to happen. You're not going to find a roster that works out that way. It just won't happen, right? But what you do want to look at is if I've got a player that's, going to cost me 28, 29, 30 points, I'm also going to need a player that costs me, 15 to 20, right? I got to start balancing things out. So I started looking at players that had a significant role on their particular team with those kind of point values, somewhere between 15 and 20. And here's a few guys that came up that kind of made the list. And I've got Livers, Wiggins, Drummond, and Allen. These 4 guys pop up, and price-wise, they're all within it too, but Livers is significantly cheaper. So that makes him someone you're kind of interested in targeting. Because right now, what I've brought up here is the lowest offered price from a manager. So that's a sick deal in comparison. So that's someone I'd be looking for in the new card auctions to see if I can get cheap. Maybe even get him for $5, right, in the new card auctions. If he starts going for more, then you can bet your ass that this manager is going to take him off the market and reprice him higher. But these are the kind of guys I was looking for in around this range. And you want a couple of these guys. You want a couple. Just because they're in the 15 to 20 range now doesn't mean they're going to stay that way for long. You have to remember that it's on a rolling 10-game average. So if some players start to exceed their potential, the cost for those players, point-wise, is going to go up. If they're in a slump, it's going to go down. So it's important to have a number of players that cover a number of sort of point levels so that each week you're able to find a group that fits under the cap, but at the same time is competitive. So you want to give yourself some leeway with each particular point total you purchase in case it goes up or goes down significantly. So after a little over 6 hours spent on the auction house, a ridiculous amount of research, reaching out to 3 different NBA analysts for information to begin with, and giving myself a target of 35 different players at different point values, I ended up purchasing, in the end, 11 players. I have 11 players on my roster. And you only need to start 5. So I've got more than enough, to be honest with you, to sub in and out depending on what happens with their point totals. So for my first limited contender series roster, this is what I'm rolling with. I got Jared Allen at 31 points, Isaiah Hartenstein at 28 points, Gary Trent Jr. at 26 points, Alex Caruso at 18, and Caleb Houston at 7. Now, I made a point of getting a couple of players with very low values, just so I could sneak in that one player at the end to stay under the cap if I've got 4 specific players I really want to roll with, which was the case this week. I really want to roll with Allen. I really want to roll with Hartenstein. Gary Trent Jr. is one of my favorite players, and Alex Caruso has just been on a tear, so I had to go with him as well. Caleb Houston, to be honest with you, I don't even know who he is. I just know he gets some minutes, and he's only worth 7 points, and that exactly puts me at 110. Did I buy Caleb Houston specifically looking for a 7-point player? No, I didn't. I kind of hit 110 by fluke, to be honest with you. I was actually expecting to finish with, say, 108 or something like that. It just happened to work out this way that his 7 points put me right on the button. I also have an 8-point player. I also have a 9-point player. So I have options at the low end of my spectrum. I have a bunch of players in the middle grounds, and then I have just a couple of guys up top. And this is how I'm going to roll all season. You'll probably never see me have a guy really over like 31, maybe the highest you ever see, unless Allen ups his numbers, in which case maybe 35 would be the highest I would go, possibly. If he goes much beyond that, I would probably stop playing him. And then I have other guys on the middle tiers that I can roll with. Say maybe Gary Trent Jr. becomes my stud that week instead of Allen, just to save myself some of that cap space. Let me know what your strategy is. Let me know what you're going with. And if you can, send me a screenshot of what your first limited contender series roster looks like. Don't forget to join the Discord. We're talking everything sports NFT on a regular basis. We talk a lot of NFL all day. We're going to start talking a lot of Sorare NBA as well. I can guarantee it. So if you haven't yet, there's a link in the description. Click it, join the Discord, join the conversation, get in on it. Till next time.